All right, so this is a map coming from Freemanpedia, Benjamin Freeman. He has just like the dopest graphics on his website. So if you're looking for maps and charts, he's got all kinds of great stuff. And so this map is just perfect because this shows exactly what we're going to talk about, right? So you can see the entire world with all the layout of who's in charge of where, right? So we've got land empires like, you know, all these ones over here, like the Manchus, Russia, Mughals, Ottomans, you know, all these different land empires. And then you have these sea empires as well that are cutting across oceans, right? So Portugal has, you know, colonies in different places. Britain is like one of the biggest empires ever. The Dutch, the French, all of them are part of this story. And so I think what makes this time period different, where this like change is around like how much of the world is now covered by somebody's rule. You know, like there's still a lot of land that's not uninhabited, of course, but isn't ruled by some major empire, right? So you can see a lot of Africa, some of that like northern Canada, Australia, and Eastern Europe separately. You know, those are ruled by different people, but a lot of the land in the world is pretty much covered, right? And then the next unit, that's when like the rest of it is going to quickly get taken up by those who come out of this time period with power still. First, let's just talk about this key concept talks through the actual empire. So I'll like kind of cut through those for you so you have the most important things. And then, but then first I want to talk about like, in order for there to be an empire in power, people need a reason to like obey who is in power, right? Someone can't just like come to power and be like, I'm in charge now and that's it. And everyone's not going to just be okay with that. There needs to be like some legitimacy to their political power. And that can come in a lot of different forms. So like throughout history, there's been all different types of ways that a ruler will legitimize their power, right? So you can be elected to power. Therefore, like, you know, your rule is legitimate because people elected you and people believe in the election system. It can be through religion, a god appointed me, right? Or I am chosen by the gods. It can be wealth. I have so much money that like, what are you going to do? Come for me, right? Fear, right? Like I'm in power because if you're not cool with it, I'll kill you. That's another way to do it. Dependency, like, you know, the people who are in power, doesn't matter because I'm just dependent for my survival. So, you know, they can stay in power if they want. I just need food. And let's look at a couple different examples from this time period in particular. So some of you guys mentioned these. Using religion to legitimize your power. This is a really important concept in this time period, but it comes up plenty of times before this. So basically, you know, if all your people believe in the same religion, if your constituents, right, the people that live in your empire, you can kind of keep them in line with your government because you can align religion and government. So just like divine right? If the God that all these people believe in authorized the king's power, then the king is held accountable to that God, and the people are going to be like, well, our God chose this king, so it must be legitimate. Aztec sacrifices was another example. Historians don't like truly know exactly what that did, but there's a couple of different things going on where basically people would give tribute to the leaders, the Aztec leaders, in the form of humans, right? So literally human sacrifice. So there's obviously some form of fear there, also some unity in like, this is what we do collectively. But this is an example of using religion, using like belief systems to legitimize your rule. And then the last one that I just put on this slide is the Confucian rituals, right? So using Confucianism, just like the mandate of heaven, using the civil service system, using those bureaucratic ways in order to make your government respectable. It aligns with how the people believe, how they see government. And so the Manchus adopt the ways that the Chinese dynasties had done before. Even though the Manchus are sort of this minority that comes to power, they appropriate those rituals. By the way, this would be an awesome question that you could see on an exam. I don't know if we haven't seen one in the last few years, but some kind of like comparison where you do compare like how rulers have legitimized power. Like really make sure you know what that phrase means, legitimizing power. Another way that across time people have legitimized power is through architecture. Build big and pretty things, others will respect you, right? If I can build this palace, if I can build this massive wall, or like, whatever, if I can build a pyramid, people will respect me because look at what I accomplished. History repeats itself, okay? So you've got the Taj Mahal as the example of this time period. We posted that on Instagram today. The Mughals, Shah Jahan built the Taj Mahal as a mausoleum, a tomb for his wife. But it really blends together this like Islamic, Persian, Indian, Hindu, it's kind of like a syncretic architecture. And so it's this big, powerful thing. And there you go, right? Like people will then see that, and then you respect the ruler because they were able to build that. They had the money, they had the manpower, they had the time, the vision. And so it's respectable. Another example is the like Palace of Versailles, right? So like Louis XIV of France built the Palace of Versailles, which is just like massive. I mean, 712,000 square feet is massive. So build this massive palace, live in it, and be this like all being. And, there you go, right? Like, look at what I built. I built this big and pretty thing. Therefore, you should respect me. In this time period, because you have an expansion of empire, I mean, you saw that map. These empires are expanding everywhere. The empires themselves are becoming more diverse. So the bigger the empire, the more diverse it will be, right? People are not the same everywhere. So, as Rome expanded in the classical era, they became more diverse. As the British Empire expanded across the seas, it became more diverse. As, the Russian Empire expanded, it became more diverse. So because of that, there's this need to essentially like limit the influence of minority groups because there's a fear that those minority groups will then overthrow the majority, right? Like this is like the heart of, racist societies, right? Like societies that build hierarchies out of necessity because there's a need to like limit that influence. There's a nervousness. But the castas in the Americas were this social ranking system based on race, based on the mixture of your race. And so in doing this, they limited the jobs, the influence, the political rights that people had based on their race. The more connected to Spain and Portugal you were, and more white you were, the more power you had. The less white you were, the least power you had. Totally worth knowing these terms. Really, really good for evidence points in any LEQ, right? So like peninsulares, they're literally coming from the Iberian Peninsula, born in Spain and Portugal. They would have had the most influence. The Creoles would have been born in the New World, in the Americas, but of European descent. Mestizos is a mixture of European and native, and mulatto is a mixture of European and African. Today, most of the population of Mexico is mestizo. Fun fact. So the other examples, and there's a bunch in this time period, but the Ottomans also had a very diverse region. And so what they did, the Ottoman Empire was Muslim. They kind of carved out these other territories which was part of the Millet system, where they would have these like local rulers be in charge. So there was like a territory for Christians, a territory for Jews, a territory for each different religion, essentially. So by doing that, their thinking was they have their own land, they have their own ruler, they won't overthrow the Ottoman Empire.